This is Season 2, Episode 12 of Mastering the RPG, a tabletop RPG podcast all about upping your game. Doesn't matter if you're a game master or player, you'll find advice, ideas, and some strong opinions. Tonight's episode, the Essential GM and Player Toolkit, or How Many Dice is Enough. Welcome to Mastering the RPG. Like I said, it's an RPG podcast, and we're about ideas, advice, cool stuff, and all sorts of cool stuff like that. I'm Carl with my co-host Eric and James, and you can find information about the show at masteringtherepg.com. You can send us email or feedback or questions at gamemaster@masteringtherepg.com. So it's good to have everybody back on the mics again. Hi there, guys. What you been up to? How you been doing?
Busy. We've just finished Oz Comic Con, which is the Australian version of Comic Con here in Melbourne, in Australia. Wow. Spent a couple of great days killing lots of players in Call of Cthulhu one-shots, which was hilarious. It's like you have an hour, you're in an underground temple, and here's a stick of dynamite. Let's see how you can blow each other up in crazy ways. So having a lot of fun. Very, very busy at the moment. We've got 2 more weeks in our school term, so doing lots of school games before vacation time. It's all things RPG and all things go. It's really good.
And so you guys play 1 hour sessions, or is this just a demo?
Yeah, it's like a little demo that we run. I work. You know, I run some games on behalf of Chaosium, which is the publisher that does Call of Cthulhu, and they do little 1 hour introductory sessions into Call of Cthulhu, which is a really great way to kind of at conventions and you kind of sit down, have a bit of a try. And my mortality rate is significant. It's quite impressive. I think about 80% don't make it through the adventure. We all stand up and give them a standing ovation when they die in the most macabre way, and it's good fun to watch. And we do get a bit of a crowd around in these games when people come to watch it, because it's so ridiculously over the top horror. It's really good fun.
That sounds awesome. Nice. So Eric, what you been up to? Anything exciting lately?
It's funny you talked about how many dice, because I just got a lot of dice. My local Barnes & Nobles was closing, so I just went in there and just bought things I didn't need, including all these different cool dice sets with different prints. I got a new dice bag. I got some other dice from a Savage Worlds box set. So yeah, I have way too many dice right now.
I'm not sure I understand what you're saying. I hear the words, but it doesn't make sense.
If robbers come, during Christmas time, I can just lay my house with dice, and it will
just with the D4s. You'll be fine.
Yeah, just the D4s, which are the most dangerous things to ever be invented, like everybody knows.
That's pretty funny.
And you, Carl, how's things going in Carl world?
We're going all right. I think we've missed a couple of game sessions, so we haven't had a chance to keep the momentum going on the campaign. I'm working on a couple of side things. I got my song out. That happened. Just trying to keep the adventure going for the players and stay on top of that. And then, of course, with all this work with you guys, that takes a lot of time. So thank God it's a labor of love. So excellent. It's great to have you guys again. So why don't we get right into it? And I hear we've got a cool stuff found. We have cool stuff found. Do you copy? Cool stuff found. Over. All right, cool stuff found. Hey, James, you got something you ran into you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, it was. I found another book, because let's face it, my bookshelf's not full of enough how to RPG books. A couple of weeks ago when we were talking about making creative and interesting combats, I noticed in my research for that session, one of my favourite RPG authors, Keith Amman, who does The Monsters Know What They're Doing and More Monsters Know What They're Doing, had released a new book called How to Defend Your Lair. And I thought I'd buy it and have it delivered. So it arrived about a week ago. How to Defend Your Lair, which is it's a chunky piece of literature. It's comes in at about 330 odd pages, And it's a really good in-depth discussion on how to create a monster lair. And all sorts of different types of monsters. So it could be a dragon lair, it could be a drow cavern, it could be a bandit's lair, and the kind of levels of defense that these places should have. And that could be some of the more espionage-like defenses. So you could have perimeter spies that are working through some information. It could be different traps. It could be different breaches. It could be... and it works through how to design one of these places from a very different perspective, which I thought was really, really cool. It goes through a process where you're asked to rate what you're protecting and what's important to be protected, and then how you would protect these things. So I really love it. It's a really good way to think about a kind of map design in a lot of ways, because let's face it, most of the time when our adventurers go in, they're in a lair of some description. It features some outstanding lairs, examples of them. So they do 16 different ones from very different kind of aboleth, what was I reading today? The Esoteric Society Meeting House, and an underwater lair and caverns and things like that. Talks through some interesting bits about interrogating prisoners, and overall another great book by Keith Amman. So I'm a big rat for his stuff. I think it provides some really thought-provoking material. It is, again, set a little bit in terms of 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons in that they have some stat blocks in the back. But the best thing I love about his work is they are a bit system neutral. This one particularly would apply to any of the games that you play in terms of the theory behind how you would set up a lair. So check it out, How to Defend Your Lair. Very cool. I really enjoy it.
So so if you design your lairs around this book, does that mean that the challenge rating would be actually a little higher because you've done a good smart design in most DMs? We don't do as smart a design of the lairs as we possibly could. Would you say that's true?
I think that's very true, and this goes for a lot of what Keith does. In the Monsters Know What They're Doing, it's about taking monsters and really upping the ante in terms of the cleverness of your conflicts. Absolutely, and in some ways you would almost want to prepare your players to do a little bit more reconnoitering, a little bit more reconnaissance to try and figure out how you would breach some of these places, because it does get a little bit involved. No question. For veteran players, I think they'd love this kind of challenge. I think it would be a really good way to kind of up the ante a little bit and spice it up. But yeah, that's a fair point. Perhaps use with caution for some of your beginner groups.
Got to be careful. The ones who just go in face first. Yeah. Okay. Yep.
Or just give them magic items. That will balance it out.
All right. Well, cool. That is pretty cool. That's one that I may have to figure out how to get a chance to read it myself. Maybe pick up a copy. Very cool. So let's go on to the main topic.
Mastering the RPG with Carl, Eric, and James. Yeah.
All right. Welcome to the main topic. We're going to talk about the essential GM and player toolkit. And Eric is going to lead us through tonight, take the reins, so to speak. So go ahead, Eric. Why don't you drive us through this minefield, or no, not a minefield. This beautiful wheat field, ready to be harvested.
It's almost like Santa's workshop, right? Where you're just like bumping into presents left and right. That's how I think of it.
Oh yeah, beautiful. Yeah.
Because what do we talk? Right, we're talking about here, like what are the resources and the products that you guys think are essential for all kind of different types of the plays, as far as game mastering and playing, right? I think that's what we're focusing on.
Yeah. Things that you can hopefully take away and use in your own game because you heard about something cool that we've been using, or some of that stuff. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's talk about kind of the essential items just in general, whether it's online or in person. So I think to start out, let's talk about character creation, and then this is for players or for GMs to recommend to people. Carl, do you have any character creation that you go to a lot?
Yeah, and I earlier we were talking, and you said this is so specific to a system, and so my system of choice is Savage Worlds, and so the quintessential out there is savage.us, which is savage .us, and that is an actual licensee from Pinnacle Entertainment. So they have access to all the books and all the content in the books so that you can create your characters. And it creates a stat block that some importers for different VTTs support. Like I believe Foundry VTT has a stat block importer that sometimes works. I don't know. I haven't had a ton of luck with it. But so, yeah, that's like 99% of what I use just because of the system that I play all the time.
James, do you have one that you prefer?
There's a couple that I use. My two systems, of course, are Call of Cthulhu for Chaosium and Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. So Call of Cthulhu run an online character creator called the Doll's House, DHOLE House, which is a doll is a massive worm that will destroy the world. And that's a fantastic resource in that it's been able to bring together not only the official content, but also it has a lot of community-created content in there, which is really amazing. So in terms of different professions and bits and pieces. So check that one out. That's really, really good. Of course, the big behemoth that will destroy us all in actuality is probably D&D Beyond, which I don't think we can escape. Most of my younger players love D&D Beyond. They'll create infinite amounts of characters on there. Of course, the trick with that is it costs you a lot of money as a GM, in that you have to purchase all the content a second time if you love your hard copy books. And so D&D Beyond is probably the one that most people will be familiar with. And I must admit, my kids absolutely can't get away from it. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is a whole episode on its own, I think. Guys.
Well, we'll see what it turns into, because I don't think it's not going to stay the same as it is. I kind of have a different take on this completely. Not only do I mainly play Savage Worlds, and I used to play a lot of 5e, and now I play a lot of Pathfinder 2e, but I'm also like, I've been in groups where I just try tons of different systems. I like one-shotting. I like trying, pretty much anything. I'll pretty much play at least once. So for me, it's like a definitely different experience. A lot of those games don't have dedicated character creators. And when we're talking about when you're totally new to the game, they can be helpful. I don't like them. I don't think they're good for players, and I generally say, don't recommend them, especially when I don't know how many people I've taught Savage Worlds and Pathfinder 2e at this point. Like, I seriously can't. I've taught so many people because I'm just usually I like it. I like teaching and I like creating characters, so I'm very open to that. But generally, I think the best way is if there's a VTT that has those resources or has some of those resources, I think it's infinitely better to make it yourself, because a lot of the character creators, even though they might have stuff, they don't quite get all the order of operations down usually. They don't quite, always have all the right options or do all the right math necessarily. And I think that when you're learning a new game, I think that's the character creators are just kind of a crutch, and that you don't learn the game. Often. This is just my opinion on it, right? So I think it's, with like Foundry, and Foundry has all of Pathfinder 2e. So when I'm teaching people, I'm like, there's a lot of these online ones, but I'm always like, they often don't say all of the different specifics, like, oh, this is only available if you have strength 16, or this is only available if you're this thing, or not that thing. I just think you learn the game so much better when you actually go through it. And like I said, some games like Pathfinder have a full resource online for free, and they have like Nethies, which is another full online resource that you can kind of use from. But yeah, that's just my take on it, is virtual tabletops. Like when I want to create a lot of characters, especially in D&D, like you brought up, James, I literally had 5e games, even when I just mostly played. I would be a GM. I had my own 5e games that I just had as characters that I liked creating, and like maybe that I would want to play one day. I had that for Savage Worlds, 5e, and Pathfinder. I just have games of just characters that I've made. And I find that it's a lot more fun and easy, and you don't have to pay usually, right? Or not that much compared to D&D Beyond. So that's my take on it, at least.
Cool. Interesting.
It's an interesting take. I agree and disagree a little bit. I do see a point. The game literacy in terms of what makes up the different bonuses, why things work together, that some of the choices that you make probably get streamlined a little bit too much, and people don't actually realise the options that they're skimming over. I will say, by and large, the vast majority of my players are quite young, and it just helps streamline that process in a lot of ways.
For sure.
It just makes it quick and easy.
Yeah, I mean that's why when I like say the VTTs that have all the stuff, whether it's you have free Pathfinder on Foundry, or you have D&D 5e tools on Roll20 or whatever. They have all the edges, they have all the feats, they have all the
That's true.
stuff, so it makes it easy just to drag and drop. But yeah, okay, let's move on to another essential. Is note taking. Now I think this is interesting, and we'll bring it up. So Carl, let's start with you. What is your take on note taking? Now, is this? Would you say you would do this in real life, or is this for you virtually?
For both. I don't when I'm playing live, I don't spend a lot of time taking notes. So I don't have a book and I'm filling it out. And when the time comes to actually capture those notes, whether it's online or whether it's in a face-to-face game, I do pull up an electronic tool. And because it's so much easier to organize and set things up. And my tool of choice is OneNote. So I'm a OneNote person. Everybody's got their favorite. And I actually did an episode on Tabletop Tango, episode 26, that has my template that I use for my OneNote. But I like that the digital copy, it's so much easier to move things around. Like you can have a player can just say, hey, who's this person? You'll say, well, the shopkeeper's named Joe, and you have some notes under the player notes section. And then at the end of the game, you can take that person, create a tab for an NPC, drag them over, start filling it in, and then now you've got a named NPC that you didn't have before, and you're tracking them carefully, and then maybe you can have some notes as to how they'll fit into the adventure. But it's so much easier to do. I know some people like index cards and stuff like that, but I'm totally give me my laptop. I don't use my laptop at games generally, but let me pull it out after the fact and just type up some notes in OneNote.
Yeah, now we don't. I saw in the notes here we don't have a thing for campaign organization, but I was going to say for me, like I like Evernote, but it's pretty much the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So
sure.
I'm an Evernote person, but that's what I use for campaign organization. I don't know if we talk about that here with note taking, but I think it's part and parcel, right?
Yeah,
like
OneNote.
I think that's what we're
campaigns.
talking about.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about.
I literally, when I'm writing out the campaigns, I might have because you can do hyperlinks or keywords that can link to other things, and you have here's one adventure that I have in one of my little notes, and that goes under. Yeah, so for me, Evernote it's pretty much essential. And I'm not the best organizational person. I do have ADHD, so it is hard for me to often take notes. But as far as campaign organization, I prefer Evernote. As a player for taking notes, I generally find that I usually, when I make my backgrounds, my character backgrounds on Google Docs, I just use Google Docs for most things. I just find it easy and I can reference it from anywhere. I don't have to have it locally on a computer, right? I can have it on my phone or whatever. I'll have a section under my character background of notes. Of pretty much I have my people, because I just find that it's not as intense as saying using Evernote. It's easier and I can use it anywhere, and it's with my character stuff. So that's what I use for notes. Well, what about you, James?
As a player, I am terrible at keeping notes, but I try my best, and I actually get myself little books. I actually I get what I find is a beautifully bound book that kind of fits the theme of my character.
Oh, wow.
And then I just scribble endless crap in it. And I'm terrible at keeping them. So I actually like the idea when I play is having these kind of tactile, I use a set of dice that's the theme of my character, and I get a book that's the theme of my character.
Oh,
and,
man,
and I have
nerdy.
my little set and just kind of there it is. As a storyteller, though, as a GM, of course, I'm running a lot of campaigns at the same time. Which makes it very, very tricky to kind of keep everything ordered. I use, OneNote, Evernote, I use Notion, which is a similar online tool. And I am a sucker, and you guys have heard me talk about this guy forever. I talk about Sly Flourish, Mike Shea, and so I end up using his templates for campaign note-taking, and I find that's the easiest because I'm running, I run 17 campaigns concurrently, so just kind of keeping everything ordered is really important. So I like Notion and Sly Flourish's campaign notes if you're into the lazy DM's way of game prep, which I am.
Interesting. All right,
Cool.
Let's move on to random tables. What kind of random tables or generators of different sorts do you use, James?
I love random tables. Random tables are great. They that it stops you from the brain freeze when you just go, what's the tavern keeper's names? I don't know. And so I make up a lot of random tables and have them ready for use, both digitally and when we play in person. So I actually spend quite a bit of time making up my own random name generators and my own tables. I particularly like, I have my kind of 1920s horror random tables, and I have my fantasy NPC random tables where I kind of create 100 of each type of person. And the other one that I use a lot is my random table of acting mannerisms. So if you're ever stuck for quickly role-playing an NPC, I roll on this table and it might be has stutter or speaks loudly or has a ridiculous French accent, and it just gives me something just to quickly latch onto, just so that I don't have to stop and think and go, I just immediately launch into that NPC, and it just helps me get things on the fly. So NPC acting mannerisms table is probably my greatest go-to when it comes to random stuff. But I have heaps of things: random treasure generators, random monsters, random encounters, all sorts. I'm a big sucker.
So do you like using random treasure generators?
Yep, very much. Yep. As to a point, what I end up doing is I'll roll a random treasure generator prior to the session, and I'll generally roll it 2 or 3 times and then go, that one fits the best, and just pick that out. So otherwise it becomes a little too unwieldy and not as connected to the theme or to the plot of what I'm trying to do. But in my mind, it throws some curveballs at the game. So it's not all entirely orchestrated by what I do. I like different things kind of coming to me. I'm not a big fan in the old random dungeon generator, where it's kind of like, here's a 6x3 room, roll the table, then it's a T intersection, then roll a table. I'm not a big fan of those, but treasure tables, random encounter tables, love them, and I have a lot of them.
Nice. Carl, what about you?
I'm like almost the opposite. I use very, very few random tables. I did have a book that had like 100 random tables for different stuff, and I used that to, there was like, it was kind of the acting mannerisms. There was a personality table that I used for a while. Yep. And then I found that I was randomly getting personalities that didn't seem to fit the character that I was trying to portray. And so I went back to let me just define what it is. The one thing I do use, though, is for names. Names are hard to come up with. And so I do use, there's a number online. One's like fantasy name generators. .com.
That one has everything.
Yeah.
It does.
It has like the most specific, crazy, Renaissance guild or corporation, whatever. It has everything.
Yeah,
yes, I need a Norwegian sailing captain. Yeah. Okay, here's the Norwegian sailing captain.
And I take those generators and I'll generate like 50 names that I then put in my OneNote.
Yeah.
And whenever a time comes up to grab a name, then I just grab that name, put a note next to it.
Okay.
So
do it preemptively, you're saying?
Yeah, I get them all. Because, like, for example, when we played our game in Chicagoplex, that one, it's a very cosmopolitan. Yeah. So I made sure that I had some different background names so that when you ran into somebody, it wasn't just Joe Blow or John Smith or whatever. It could be very interesting. Yeah. It could be Indian. It could be Chinese. Just a variety of names that can pick up. And then I take, and as you guys pick those names and these become characters, I put that little note next to them, the name, and then later it gets dragged over and that name disappears from the list. So I always ahead of time do I take and for like random encounters or things like that, I don't do a lot of random encounters. I guess maybe that's also a little bit of Savage Worldy, throwing random things at players can be bad because of exploding dice. But I don't do a lot of random encounters or things like that. And I don't know, maybe I should do more, but I just don't. I just, if it's not defined by me out of my brain and written down, then it's just not it. It just isn't then.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, of course, I've used that. The other thing that I'll do as far as names go is I'll often like if I have a society that has kind of a real world equivalent or real world influence, then I'll go to like not name genders but like baby name things,
Yeah,
so I'll go like the
yeah.
most like the best like Welsh
Yeah,
names,
yeah.
and then I'll be like, oh,
Yeah.
then I can like I'll pick a bunch of those or whatever, or like I'll find like a West African thing or Swedish like before the 18th century. There's all these like weird official kind of name lists. So
Yeah,
which
our
sometimes
Fey
those draw fun, but yeah, it's good to like those have some really interesting names, or
And then
and you get kind of the style of name right too.
and that just made me think of Google Translate and stuff like that. Also,
Yes.
can be
Oh yeah.
really
I also
cool.
use Google Translate.
Because we were playing that game where
sure.
basically everything kind of had a Swahili vibe to it, and so
Yeah.
the names of things I would put English words in, and I'd get the Swahili out, and then I'd tweak it. I'd like drop the ending and add a different ending, but it just
Yeah.
morphed into it had such character. It was still consistent within the theme, but it didn't. It felt like it had some character to it, other than just
the normal
the stuff that you'd run into. So that's also something I just thought of would be the not forget about. Yeah,
that's a really good point, because I've done that too. And like you said, it creates, because you tweak a little bit, but you still have those like where it seems like a language because there's the common sounds or whatever that keep repeating themselves. But then you make it different enough where like that's a really good resource for that.
Yeah, our Fey Touched game could have been sponsored by Top 100 Gaelic baby names. It might as well have been.
Yeah, and then didn't we? But then, I remember we used a lot of Gaelic names, but then didn't we also like we used French as Sylvan? Wasn't that the?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so I remember we had French stuff too. Okay, very cool.
And I always use German as halfling, so that's just what I do. So
Okay, weird mix there, but okay. All right, let's talk about what are your kind of essentials for like you think of specifically as online. Carl.
Well, there's
let's talk about tokens, I guess first. Let's talk about tokens.
well, so that's a big thing on
Online tokens.
right? Is being able tokens are so essential to online play, right? We're going to pull a map
yes.
out, we're going to throw tokens on, and and then the number one is the token stamp that you find on rolladvantage.com. You use that all the time, but I almost always create my own tokens from public domain images, or and since we're playing a personal game, you can steal them off the internet and nobody cares. At least my personal games, if I'm doing something for a convention, then I'm much more careful about copyright. But I don't have a lot of like things that I subscribe to that have tokens or things like that. I tend to roll on my own. I'm starting to think I'm cheap or something. I don't know. Maybe I just don't.
No, that is totally normal. I mean, most people, I think, create their own tokens. For me, and I play more games, but I GM games too, so I have a lot of different resources that I use. I mean, I like Token Stamp 2 better than Token Maker. I just find it easier, and it's just web-based. And I usually, I mainly use Pinterest. I think Pinterest is the best. If we're talking about just like free, you're not doing for copyright. Pinterest has the best assortment of art. Outside of now the AI generators, but as far as like people make art, Pinterest is just the easiest one, and you can. You type in the kind of your weird character that you want to find, and then you click on pictures that you like, and it'll show you more pictures. It's better than Google. It's by far the best way to find pictures. Also, if you are looking for things that are copyright free, and things that we've RPG, what is it called? What's the main website that has like RPG?
Drive-through RPG.
Drive-through RPG has, excuse me, has a lot of like token sets that you can get. And a lot of those will have either they're completely, you can use them fair use, like just completely, or they have like pretty good ones where, as long as you bought it, it's fine. So those is a really good resource for copyrighted ones. The other one that you can use that I think a lot of people are doing now is Hero Forge, which is also for real life, where you can make tokens, but they're like Picture Maker was robust enough that they started introducing where like, even if you're free, if you're pro, you get better token stuff from it. But when you create your character, you can just export like a really awesome token with like a really cool token border. They have all these cool token borders now, and I think pro is pretty cheap. So that's actually a really good way. Whether you like the art or not, I think is a up to you. I think the better thing with that is everybody is using that as far as their character tokens. For me, I hate when it's like some person has used like an anime-like token and another person has used like a more realistic one, and somebody's used like a picture from a movie. I hate when like everybody has like a completely different style because it just doesn't gel.
Yeah.
So I think with Token Maker, you really have to have everybody using it. But those are my main resources as far as tokens. James, do you have any ones that you love?
And I can look. I'm going to be coming at all of this from a very different angle. That I run these things professionally, so I need to have commercial rights to be able to use them, and so I pay a lot of money for virtual maps, virtual tokens, and all sorts of things. I do use Hero Forge for player character tokens, so I get them to design their character, and that way there's another little sense of their own involvement. And I have a pro subscription to Hero Forge, so you can convert it into a very good top-down token. And then I am a Patreon of a number of different token makers. Just before this session, I thought I'll just check to see how many tokens I've got in my token folder. I have 43,000 tokens currently sitting in my token folder.
Wow.
Some big ones that I love using, and I'm going to name drop a few here. Check them out if you're into these kinds of things. Most of these patrons will allow access to a full back catalogue, so you can kind of become a patron of one of these creators and grab literally thousands of tokens. My 4 top ones are Splattered Inc.
Oh, yeah.
I think amazing artwork, really, really good, and they've just come out with a Kickstarter for little plastic versions of these for live games as well, but they look absolutely incredible. Forgotten Adventures I'm a big fan of because their catalogue is massive. They've got pretty much every 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons creature you could ever think of, and they also run maps, so you can run their maps and their tokens to give a really good, seamless kind of visual palette to your games. Loos is a really creative artist and does a really diverse amount and has been operating in the space for years. So was a big token guy in the early days of Roll20 and is now has upped his art considerably, and has just got a really wonderful European kind of style to the artwork. And the last one is David North that I use a lot. If you're using an official 5th edition game, David North does the full every NPC in the book kind of tokens. So you can grab a whole module worth of tokens in one hit, and you'll have every monster, every NPC ready to go, ready to plonk into your game. All of those 4 of those guys do offer commercial licensing. So for me and for anyone that's doing a stream game, or anyone who's running a paid DM, anyone who's doing a convention game, you can get a commercial license and kind of just operate as you need to. And to be fair, they're pretty damn reasonable. You know, like a commercial license for all 4 of those costs me less than $20 a year. So it's not like a ridiculous amount of money, but it's just an extra added bonus that I think pay your creators. And I'm using these assets all the time. So there's my 4 token makers.
Awesome.
Nice.
Awesome.
Let's move on to the next big thing in maps. James, what are your maps that you love?
And here we go again. Let's name drop a whole heap of Patreons. I mentioned Forgotten Adventures as my go-to map kind of theme. I like them. They have, since probably the last 6 months, come out with a new Patreon called FA Battlemaps, where they do generic fantasy battle maps with wonderful extra overlays, which I'm really enjoying at the moment. So they might do a battle map of a fort where they have overlays of different secret doors. They might have an overlay where half the fort's burnt down. They might have an overlay where there is no fort. It's just a clearing. So for online games, I'm using a lot of their material. I also use a program called Dungeon Draft to create my own maps. And Dungeon Draft, there's 2 really big players in this space, Dungeon Draft and Incarnate, and they are an investment in that, you know, you buy one, and then you buy assets for that one. And so, in some ways, I'm a little regretful. I kind of like Incarnate now, but that might be.
I was going to talk about Incarnate, but yeah,
because I'm up to my eyeballs in Dungeon Draft assets. I'm not making the switch now. And some of these creators that I've talked about, Tom Kartos, Forgotten Adventures, create map and asset packs for dungeon drafts, so you can
Okay.
kind of create dungeon draft maps that look exactly like the official Forgotten Adventure ones, which I love because it keeps my visual consistent. But there are a lot of outstanding Patreons out there for fantasy battle maps, particularly, and also modern ones, and also period ones for Call of Cthulhu. Again, there are some excellent map makers for specific modules. So there are some creators, DM Andy, Morvold Press, Mythos maps, and Tych maps, for creators that if you are doing a specific adventure for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons in particular, and you want really beautiful maps that reflect the official content, I thoroughly recommend DM Andy and Morvold Press in particular. So if you're running Rime of the Frost Maiden or Curse of Strahd or any of the big ticket item campaigns, check out those guys because they do absolutely stunningly gorgeous maps. But again, I'm a professional dungeon master, so all these guys offer commercial ability for me to be able to stream and run games commercially. So I'm certainly in a more expensive rabbit hole than most people, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, so I was going to talk about Incarnate because that's the one. I mean, mainly use it for world map type things.
Yep.
And they've only gotten better and better. Like I was using it way back in the day when it was just starting out. Now I pay for the Pro subscription, and it's just so good now. And there's a little bit of a learning curve as far as the world map type things go. And also, I think just making world maps in general, like we could have a whole thing about that. I mean, it's good to learn about how geography actually works to make good maps, because that's the way our mind works, and even with fantasy games. But regardless, it's so robust, and it's mostly free. Like you can use the free version. Even the Pro version is pretty cheap. You don't have to buy assets. Like they just give you so much, and you just have access to all of it. And then you can upload your own ones, which I really like. You can upload your own, like whether mountains or whatever symbols, anything you want, you can just upload. And now they have like now it's mostly fantasy only, but now they have a pretty robust like combat map maker, which is kind of new. And it's pretty extensive and really cool to just drag and drop.
It's got a lovely style.
It's
so
really
gorgeous.
beautiful. And now I use Incarnate for a lot of other things. I used it for my Fallout game. I've used it for other modern games. So you don't have, it doesn't have to be fantasy. You can play with it enough. So that's my big favorite. And then of course I talked about before on, I think it was either last episode or 2 episodes ago for Cool Stuff. My favorite. I don't have a lot of Patreons that I use, but I just forgot his name now. What's his name? I just talked about him. Cyberpunk and Fantasy.
Yeah.
I'll go back. I'll get back to it.
Go back and
Carl,
watch the previous or listen to the previous episodes to get that
he's in the
information.
previous one because that guy has he has the I'll just log on to Patreon right now. He has like the coolest, probably the coolest motion maps that I've ever seen. And it started with Cyberpunk and Post-Apocalypse, solution maps, and now fantasy maps. That's what it's called.
Yep.
If you just go, they're separate Patreons, but it's the same guy. And now he has the whole fantasy section, and now he has the. So he's my favorite Patreon by far. Carl, what about you?
Well, for my convention games and things like that, where it's out, I tend to do them all myself from scratch without. I don't have Dungeon Draft or anything. I tend to use good old-fashioned things like GIMP with assets and resources and Mac-specific applications and stuff like that. I've even used PowerPoint once to make a map of a mall that so that you could have the layout of the mall.
That's disgusting.
Oh my god!
I'm kidding.
It worked, and it had that.
I know you're a PowerPoint wizard. I know that already. So,
but it had that feel of the board you'd look at a mall when you go into a mall and you look at the board and you say, that's cool. Where all these stores are. It just allowed for that look. Yeah, exactly. And that was the goal of that map was to have that. But of course, for my personal games, our battle maps is online. And a lot of the tools you guys are talking about are just fantastic. But that's kind of me. So let's keep moving. So I don't have a lot to offer there.
All right, we're still in the online section for music. I think, James, you've talked about this a lot, right?
Yeah, I'm
did
a
a cool
big
stuff
fan
on
of
it before.
I think it was I think the first cool stuff found we ever did was on Sirenscape.
Yeah.
Sirenscape, amazing. I'm going to give a plug. They're an Australian company. I've met the guys. Ben and the team are just outstanding individuals. Give them all your money. That's all I'm saying. Sirenscape is an online streaming tool that allows you to, as a storyteller, to press a button and all your players will hear the same sounds. There's a couple of new ways to do it. They've now got a web-based version of it, which means that you don't even need to install a program. And again, if you're a master Sirenscape subscriber, you can get access to their official content. So again, look, and I hark on this a lot, but for those that really want all the bells and whistles for their 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons game, but also Savage Worlds they support. They also support Cyberpunk Red. They also support Call of Cthulhu. You can get their official modules, Soundscapes, which I'm running Masks of Nyarlathotep, the massive world-spanning Call of Cthulhu game, and just to have all the soundtracks for all the scenes for 7 different countries is extraordinary. Like, I want a Peruvian market. Now I want downtown Shanghai. Now I want a New York cemetery. And they've got all the soundtracks for it, and they're just beautiful, and they're really amazing. So I know other people use YouTube and they use Spotify and bits and pieces, but for me, Sirenscape's just amazing. I love using it.
I mean, Sirenscape has all the sound effects, and there used to be other ways to do it. It's so hard now because a lot of the tools aren't there to integrate like your own, and it just takes so much time when you're uploading your own music or your own sound effects. Like sometimes there's mods for Foundry that have just like sound effect packs that you can actually get for free. And a lot of times when you download map packs on Foundry, that within the directory, there'll be like the sound effects that you, like for the maps, or there'll be stuff like this you can kind of steal. But otherwise, it's pretty much, for Discord, it's like there's a lot of bots. I mean, I'm sure most people know. I like the ones the best that use YouTube because there's a lot of good like YouTube mixes that you can use. I think Fredboat is the one that I've seen used the most. But as a player, I mean, I was saying this to you guys before, as a player, I often, if a GM is not providing their own music, I use Spotify and I make my own. I just be like, okay, I'm going to find a good, playlist basically of whatever genre I'm going for. And that helps me. Carl, do you have any specific music ones that?
I don't do a lot of music. I'm one of the folks where you're listening to your own playlist.
I use sci-fi playlists right now.
Yeah, I don't do a lot. And if I do have sound effects, there's a lot of royalty-free, public domain sound sources out there, and I participate in them. So I offer my sound effects that I've come up with through my days to them, and then awesome. I take advantage of theirs. So, and as as somebody who creates music, the Sirenscape, the fact that they have so much content, it really does blow my mind. It really does. But
and it's that it's like so easy to then implement. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing, because I've had like tons of sound effects and tons of music, but it's just so hard to like, when you're doing your prep of like, okay, getting that all loaded up correctly and using whatever program you're using. So I think that's the best part for me, is just how easy it is, right, to put together custom soundtracks and custom scenes and everything.
It's really interesting too. I was talking to my group about this on Saturday. I ran my Masks game on Saturday, and I find this has probably changed the way that I run games now. The use of music and the use of ambient sound really changes the pace in which I run a game. I think, having a little bit of extra volume in the background, a little bit of extra noise so that my voice doesn't have to fill the entire room can change the way in which I actually describe and run and storytell. And I just had a moment where the soundtrack, conked out on me. My mobile ran out of charge, just happened to run out of charge, and everything went quiet. And the difference in the way I presented my game was quite significant. So in some ways, once you start GMing with a soundtrack, I think it actually changes the way you do it. I quite love it. I think
when you think about it, right? Like music is so like how it affects our brain and how it affects our mood is so powerful. And like you think about like TV shows and movies, like can you ever imagine those without music? Like it would be, and sometimes like you don't think about the music that's playing, but like if the music's not there, you notice it, right? So I think music is an extremely powerful tool when used in games. When it's used correctly, the right type of music set to the scene can completely immerse players like way more than if you're not using it. It
Very
is just such a powerful that kind of works subconsciously, almost like reptilian brain. Because, anyways, so yeah, I think music is extremely powerful, and so are sound effects, right? The same thing with like movies, like they're so or TV shows, they're so undervalued or so underappreciated by audiences. Sound design, I did that in college a lot. But when it's not there, when it's done badly, you really notice it. And when it's done really well, like it is extremely powerful. But just, so I 100% agree, James. So as far as online, I think there's something here called images. I don't know if do you want to talk about that at all? I think we already kind of talked about that. But James, either of you?
I've just got one little extra hint, which I thought it's a great little resource. I think that they're worthy of a plug. I run all of my online games over Zoom. And so what I find is there's a great resource called James RPG. And I know it's kind of the thing. But James RPG is not me. It's another actual good artist. And James RPG specializes in animated backgrounds. And so you can get the official 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons' animated background. So if you want to know what Cragmore Castle looks like with birds flying over the top of it, you can kind of do it. And so in my games, I always make sure that Castle Ravenloft is there as my animated background. So check him out. He does great GIFs and great MP4s and static images as well. But just another little thing that I add as well, just to add to the extra level of subscriptions that I support to run all this stuff. But James RPG animated images. Check them out. They're really good.
All right. Carl, anything here?
No, I think let's keep her going. Let's keep her going.
I have a VTT section here. I think we pretty much already talked about that. Anybody else have any thoughts about VTTs?
Here
we go.
The only thing is I use 2. So, I know people, they get very hung up on whether they're a Foundry VTT person or a Roll20 or a Fantasy Grounds. I use 2 because Roll20 works better for convention games, online convention games, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because it's got easier setup, and then Foundry is better for my home game because there's so many modules that I can plug in. So don't be afraid to leverage more than one tool, right?
Yeah, and then also I think the thing with VTTs also is there's better ones for different games. Some are stronger for some games, some are not as strong for some games. And then I also think some are stronger for game masters and some are stronger for players. Yeah, I think James, you have something to say about this.
Yeah, I've found myself in a weird situation. I actually use Fantasy Grounds, which is probably not the most popular, which could actually impact the amount of games that I end up running, but only because of the automation that it allows you to do. If you're running a 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons game with children that don't know the nuts and bolts of how to play and having a single button that manages the whole thing about concentration spells, then it absolutely is a winner. The UI is, I'm not going to lie, is fucking awful, and I hope they fix it. But Fantasy Grounds for me is probably the most robust system as well. It's not web-based, so it means that, in terms of its stability, it's fantastic. But again, I'm doing things very differently to you guys. I can see why most players would use Roll20
it also
or Foundry.
depends, right? Like I said, like if you're doing Pathfinder 2 2nd edition, if you're not using Foundry, you're insane. Like that's just like Foundry has Pathfinder 2e unlock for a lot of the same reasons you said. But then other times, like for Savage Worlds, the module isn't that great, and Roll20 is often easier to use, like Carl was saying. So it really does depend on what you're doing. But yeah, let's move on from VTTs because that's a separate episode almost. I think here let's talk a little bit about conventions and in person. I kind of feel like those are the same, but we'll talk about convention first.
No, sure. I think we probably Carl, can mix them a little bit.
Yeah. So for Carl, let's talk under the convention part. Let's talk about specifically versus a home game. What are your tools for convention? Then we'll move on to home games because I think there's some overlap, but I think there's some specific things, Carl, that you would only do for conventions that you wouldn't do for a home game, an in-person home game, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing is for convention games, theme, and props, right? For essential
hell yeah.
to a convention game is for me, again, I play Savage Worlds, and so
Yeah.
I have custom bennies that are themed for the game. The traditional poker chips, throw that out the window. Like, for example, I had a Dragonlance game, and my bennies were all little dragon figures. So everybody used that as the bennies. And then I'd have themed decks. So I have a fantasy deck or a space-themed deck for my initiative cards. And then even themed dice, if I can do them. So that I, as the game master, rolling out in front of the players, if I'm doing a game that's kind of modern military, I have a set of dice that are camouflaged. They have the camo feel, and I roll those so that, because I roll in front of the players, I always roll out in open. So even if I have a screen, I don't tend to use it that much, other than kind of keep the notes behind it. But I always roll out in the open. So it's really fun to have themes, and then of course props, right? I'll bring, even though I do mostly theater of the mind and I don't do play maps, I will bring a big map that shows, like, for one of my games, you're in a colony, and so I have a map that's maybe 3x4 that shows the entire colony, but I'll never once put a miniature on it. It's just so players can lean over it and get into it, and say, hey, I'm moving here in this corridor, and then I'm moving here. It's like, great, and then the rest is theater of the mind. Definitely.
Let me talk. So is the reason why you think, more so than a home game, why themed things are important, is that because it's like you have such a short amount of time at a convention to kind of immerse the person into it? That's why that's more important? Is that what you're
I
saying,
think,
pretty much?
I think part of it is when you go to the convention, you're going for an experience. And so as a game master, I want to bring a fun, interesting experience, and having things that they don't
eye-catching.
They don't necessarily have at home, right? They're, it's fun, right? It's, getting a dragon thrown at you for a Benny is a lot more fun than a poker chip. And maybe that at home, you get poker chips thrown at you, but it's just different. It's fun. It just
kind of the theme park vibe of, like,
and plus you're in a room with 100 other people. Make your table a little more special, a little more. We're a team. We're part of the same group, because we all have something that others don't in the room. That's my opinion.
James, I think you agree with this a lot, right? I think you.
Oh, totally, absolutely, yeah. I mean, there's two overarching things for me at a convention. First one is portability, in that I'm going to walk into that con with generally a kind of a satchel with everything that I need to run for the entire day. And the second one is exactly what Carl said. It's about theme and immersion and getting things running. I actually create a DM screen for each of my convention games, which has key images facing away from me so that people can just get immersed in that. Run a fantastic Call of Cthulhu game called the Crimson Carnival, which is about a horror circus. So I've got period pictures of 1920s freaks on the outside of this DM screen so that people get that kind of look as soon as I set up. And on the inside is all the key plot points on the DM screen. So it's quick and easy to set up, and off you go. But handouts, I've got, the tea-stained documents are everywhere. You name it, it's all there. But it's all about immersion and also portability.
And backups.
So one of the things I always bring... and packability, yeah. One of the things I always bring with me is this tiny, it's not huge, maybe an 8-inch by 8-inch whiteboard, just a little whiteboard with some whiteboard markers, so I can quickly make a quick map, or I can quickly jot down an initiative order, or something that you can just literally throw into a pocket of a satchel and off you go. The other thing that I use if I'm running 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, and I don't do this much at conventions because I find that everyone does it, so I actually prefer running Cthulhu at conventions than I do D&D. But if I do run D&D, there's a great group called Printable Heroes, which do these kind of standees. They're 2-dimensional miniatures that you can kind of quickly fold up and quickly put on the table. So I use those as well. But yeah, I've got my little, it's like a laptop bag. If I can't fit everything I need in my laptop bag, then it doesn't go to a con. One thing I have been doing and is I actually bring a little Bluetooth speaker, because I still run Sirenscape at conventions because I love it. And it gets me immersed as much as the players.
Okay. Anything else on, like, tools essential for Carl, for you?
Just backups. That's another essential. Backups.
Okay.
Print it, USB, CD, another copy in the car. Always backups of everything. So,
All right. Okay, now let's finally talk about like in-person essentials. I mean, some of this will have some crossover, but yeah, I mean, as far as like this is your campaign game, what are the most important kind of resources you use? And again, I think this will be a little overlap with our online versions, but let's talk about maps or templates, things like that. What do you use for maps? I mean, for me, just real quick, there's so many like. You can go out and buy ones. There's, of course, like drawing stuff on a grid, whatever the dry erase thing. For me, the stuff that I've done is I like having modular assets, and you can buy really expensive ones like Dungeon. What's the one called, James?
Forge.
Dungeon Forge, yeah. Which of course is amazing. But for me, the stuff that I've used is, like I said, I think I said this in another one before, is that often board games. Like I was a Kickstarter of Gloomhaven, and that has just a insane amount of different maps and with the different environments and different like settings and buildings and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of other board games have stuff like that too. When you do like adventure board games, just has a lot. So it's if you can find used board games, those are huge resources for maps and for tokens. Like I'll just jump the gun here a little bit for tokens too. It's for cheap. But the other thing that I've done for maps is you can find a lot of all the stuff we've talked about for maps online. You can pretty easily print those out on cardstock, and then you just buy a little bit of foam, and you can just glue them onto foam. And it's really, and I'm not a good artist, but it's really easy to do, and you can pretty much make them modular. You can just print those out and do it in blocks, and you just cut them, and it's just really easy to do, and then you just have a really lightweight, kind of a huge like library of maps that you can pull out pretty easily. So basically, any maps that you find online, you can print and just put on a little bit of foam core. So those are my main things as far as in person. Carl, you have something that you like to do in person?
Well, I just wanted to play a little bit off of what you were saying. I take the approach. Yeah. So I use the dry erase kind of map templates. But what I do is I'll print out the battle map, the cool battle map, in a smaller format. So 8.5 by 11, 10 by 14, and then we'll draw the bigger map on the placemat. That's where the characters would go and the tokens would go or whatever. Just because I find it, like you said, the library. It's easier to have a library of 8.5 by 11 maps that you can pull out and then quick jot them down. It's not quite as immersive, but it works. And then, of course, for me, making sure you have those templates that are available from the vendors, like for either blast templates or your cone templates or your status templates that you can put on the characters are always really, really useful when you don't have those online tools where you just click the button and magic happens. But I take a little different approach on the maps. But again, a lot of my maps are it's kind of theater of the mind. It's like the map is there for you
you're drawing them out.
To feel it and understand it, but not necessarily that we're going to move our tokens around all the time, for a tactical standpoint. It's a little bit different.
James?
When I do online, I do a lot more tactical stuff because the maps are easy to drop and the tokens are easy to drop. So
I'm such a hopeless case when it comes to my home game. I am a massive miniature and tabletop terrain guy. I am a massive fan of a YouTuber called Black Magic Craft that makes tabletop terrain, 1-inch grid kind of tiles, and I have a whole shed full of miniatures.
Oh my god!
Full of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of painted and unpainted, more unpainted than painted miniatures. That is to my eternal shame. I run 99.9% of my games online, and I still have a shed full of miniatures.
So do you have a mini?
Do you do the 3D? Sorry,
I was just going to say, do you have a mini for each one of your tokens? So you have 43,000 minis?
I'm not quite that bad, but I'm getting close. I'm not going to lie. I've backed some ridiculous Kickstarters for miniature guys, and I do have 2 close friends that have 3D printers, and I do print an obscene amount of plastic. that never get used, and I really need some help.
Is this a cry for help right now? Is this a cry for help?
This is a cry for help.
It's affecting your marriage. Yeah.
And ironically, the one big home game that I involve all my miniatures and all my terrain in, I don't even Dungeon Master. A friend of mine does, and I play. And so he shoots me the list of all the minis that he needs for the next 6 months, and then I dutifully print them and paint them for him.
Now, do you do the 3D terrain where you like fold paper and stuff? Do you ever do that?
No,
or
I do 3D PLA printed terrain with.
Okay.
I've got trees and mountains, and I've got rocks and barrels and bars and buildings and piers and everything. It's a real problem that I actually do need help with.
Hey, send it my way. I'll help you. You just give it to me. That 3D stuff is
but
pretty
it does.
cool. The folded
it
paper.
does make for beautiful things. I started, but the beginning of my journey was Fat Dragon folded cardboard. And I do have a few boxes of folded cardboard terrain, but then immediately got into actual miniatures and during lockdown I developed a real fetish for printing and painting 3D printed stuff.
Well,
all right,
including resin and big battle boards, and I've got foam cutters, and I've got.
Look, you don't have to be embarrassed. We're all here for it. I mean,
I've got flock, and I've
if
got
I did an in-person
foliage.
game, that's the stuff that I would like to have. So
I have LED lights. I have this small smoke machine.
You may need to rethink your minimalistic convention and start doing like huge set pieces that you bring to the convention.
Yeah.
Like I say, portability's the key. Portability's the key. But yeah, it's so funny. I laugh all the time. I've got a full army of 12 different fire giants. Why you need 12 fire giants is beyond me, but I've got them. So
if you're fighting fire giants, I'd rather fight different ones than just the same one over and over again.
That's true. That's true.
Variety is the spice of life. The one other thing I did want to bring up, and this is kind of directly shouting out a specific company, but Pathfinder has a lot of good map products. But one I particularly like that I recommend that any GM gets for in-person games is much like the basic white grid where you can just draw in, which is totally, I use that too, and I think works. They have these really cool flip maps, which are basically really large ones, awesome. But they're but instead of just being a white one, I mean, they have like a snow one, and they have like a dirt one, and they have like a brick one. So you're still drawing in with the marker. It's still that like open kind of map, but it's just just have a couple of different environments on each side that you can buy in packs, so you can still kind of it's not completely just like a white, it still kind of invokes the kind of terrain that you're in, but then you're still drawing in. So those are also I have like a 4-pack or six of those with 2 different sides on each side, or one on each side.
Very cool.
The other cool, very low cost thing that I found is don't forget wrapping paper has a 1-inch grid on the back of it. So you can always just use wrapping paper and just sketch on that.
That is something you can do. Something that can be
that I will never do because it doesn't involve thousands of dollars and buckets of flock
and painting and hours and hours of shame
meticulously painting small men.
Going on to figures, I mean, I think we pretty much talked about it. Like I said, the other thing with board games, I do it. Another I'm just calling it out again because Paizo makes really good products. They have these ones that they call Pathfinder pawns. And they're basically, there's I don't even know how many boxes there are now, but you can get these, it's obviously for fantasy, but you get this box, and it's different kind of themes, and they're just standees, but there's hundreds of them. And there's such a big variety, and it's so easy to pull them out. It's basically the best value, and the art is really good, and you buy a couple boxes, and you're just pretty much set. So if you're not a crazy person with an addiction like James, you can pretty much have a huge library that takes up a fraction of the space and a fraction of the money, and have really cool art. So I think standees, whether you use the Pathfinder pawn boxes or other ones, I think standees are really the way to go because you can just have so many more of them. Yeah.
And I'll repeat my shout out to Splattered Inc. do their 2-dimensional icons, and they are just gorgeous. Check that out. So, check that one out. And they've got a backer it at the moment, so go and find it.
So,
yeah.
Any other tokens?
I I do have maybe a few thousand Reaper miniatures if anyone wants to contact me in the...
Watch for the new Master of the RPG shop, and we'll feature a bunch of custom tokens that you can buy. Look out
if
for
anyone
that.
needs 12 Fire Giants for their campaign, I've got them.
Hey, maybe we'll do a contest. There, Carl, do you have any resources that you like to use for tokens beyond what we've already been talking about?
No, I think it's really the standees, like even Pinnacle, they have their own figure flats, and everybody does it, and so it's really useful for sure.
And then finally, I'm going to say the cheap way again, the kind of like very, very cheap way you can do these things is you can get these little like wooden discs at craft stores. They're just like really cheap little wooden discs. And then again, you can just print out character art and basically just like, some sticky glue or whatever, and just put those right on there. And that's the really, really cheap way to get a lot of tokens without breaking your bank. I mean, it's you're pretty much just paying for the wood little dowels or whatever, the little wood discs.
Little discs.
That you can get like at the dollar store, you can get at craft stores for really cheap. So if you're looking to do it cheap, that's what I would recommend, is that you get those and you just cut out the portraits and then just kind of use what's it called, like a glue stick,
Right.
Put it right on there.
Right.
Anything else you guys want to talk about in person? I mean, I know for me, the one other essential for me, again, it depends on the game you're playing, right? Savage Worlds has an excellent initiative system that I recommend that even people who play D&D use. I think using a deck of cards I like differing turn-by-turn initiative better anyways than static initiative. But for me, if I am doing D&D, it's the magnet board. Again, I think Paizo, I have their one is essential for me, where it's a magnetic board and there's little magnets with like where you can write in the character names and NPC names, and then you just set it up really quickly on this like magnetic board, and that's almost completely essential for me. I don't know what you guys use as far as
one of the tricks I use for initiative in particular is I grab folded paper. So on the front will be the image of the miniature that I'm using, or the character portrait of who we're using, and on the back of that piece of paper is their initiative order, hit points, armor class, their basic attack.
Okay.
And as I drape it over the top of the DM screen, what's facing me is everyone's hit points, everyone's armor class, and what's facing the players is the portraits, so they can see initiative order, they can see who's coming up next, and I've got a bit more information that's showing to me. So that's something that I do produce for almost all of my in-person games, including conventions.
I just force everybody to go sit in initiative order. It's like, everybody move now, sit where you're supposed to. You're not supposed to do that. That's the wrong way of doing it. Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Well, Call of Cthulhu is amazing because initiative order is based on your dexterity score, so there's no randomness. So you do sit them in dex order, and you know that's which order they're going to go in.
Nice.
Which makes for simpler initiative. I think there's a whole episode in how to mess with initiative, isn't there?
Oh my God, so many people have talked
probably.
about fixing initiative or changing initiative. Yeah, right. So
yeah. So any other in-person like essentials?
No, I think we hit it.
Okay. And then I guess last but least is just general resources. I think any call outs you want to do to tie this up?
My last one, and I look again. Please reach out, Mike Shea, and sponsor us. But the Lazy Dungeon Master is the one for me. I run all of my games in the Lazy DM's way. He runs 3 fantastic books: the Guide to a Lazy Dungeon Master, the Lazy DM's Companion, and the Lazy DM's Workbook. And I could not run this many campaigns well without them. I think they are absolutely essential for everything that I run. Whether it's a convention game or if it's my ongoing games or anything like that, check him out. It's just a really good way to order your brain when it's coming to running these games.
My the absolute most important resource that you possibly could have if you're a Savage Worlds player is this little YouTube channel called Tabletop Tango.
Oh, yeah.
TabletopTango.com.
Sure. Oh, hell yeah.
They got a couple of good hosts on it. I love that one guy. So
yeah.
The other guy I'm not so sure about, but one guy's great.
One of them is solid, for sure.
Yeah, we're not going to tell you who, but you'll figure it out when you listen. So for those who don't know, which should be obvious, it's our channel. So it's Eric and my channel. So yeah, so that there's a lot of YouTube folks like Great GM, DM Lair. There's so many people who also offer advice. Sometimes it's a little long-winded, so you have to pick and choose. And there's only so many top 5 build outs for your fighter that you can watch and enjoy. But there's a lot of good resources there too.
Yeah, I mean, I think generally, like, as far as just for players and for GMs, I think, especially if it's a new game, there's so many streamed games now that it definitely, and like, you don't have to watch the whole thing, but I think there's a benefit into watching a streamed game just to kind of see, how people run it or how people play it. I think that's my last kind of tip as far as online resources is.
All right. Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. So what do you think, guys? We hit that? We nail it?
Yeah, I bet James could talk for another hour about all of his paid things.
All the
and
product
stuff he does
plugs
in the
you need in an hour is really there for sure.
Right. Well, hey, thanks everyone for tuning in, and hopefully you got something out of it. Remember to drop by masteringtherepg.com to learn about us and our projects, and how you can support us and how you can contact us and all that good stuff. Please email gamemaster@masteringtherepg.com if you have questions, need some advice, want some questions adjudicated. We're all about that and help out. You can catch us on Twitter @masteringtherepg. And now we have an Instagram, which is A Savage Worlds GM, just so that I keep the name straight as far as my normal IDs go. So, hey, we want to ask you to give us a positive review on any podcatcher of your choice, and we'd love to keep doing the show. So, once again, I'm Carl with Eric and James. Say goodbye, guys.
Bye, guys.
Happy game.